Now you're talking. This, in my opinion, is the best looking of all the hot hatches.
A work of genius. Absolutely wonderful.
The French do it again. The Peugeot 205 GTI.
In my opinion, the Peugeot 205 GTI is the best looking of the bunch. This is a rally car in waiting.
Yeah, me and Jimmy, we have the same taste in ladies as well as cars, because I utterly agree with him. It is the best looking of the bunch. I love its stance. I love the fact that it does look like it belongs on a rally stage, but it's also pure as well in terms of its design. It captures the word hot hatch beautifully.
As a much younger me would agree.
It's pretty frantic in here. You don't get much time to relax. I mean, it's just, and you're off. Driving a 1.9 is an event. I mean, going to the shops to buy a pint of milk, you're going to feel like you've done a rally stage by the time you go home. And that's what I like about it. What a cracking car.
My brother Guy got a 1.9 GTI on finance. And I was like, wow, can I have a go? And I just nailed it, and he's in the passenger seat. And about 15 seconds in, he started screaming. And I did make my brother cry a little bit. He was not happy because his beautiful car and his stupid older brother driving it like a lunatic. But my love affair with the GTI began right then.
I think the original ones that came out, I thought they looked cool. They look quite futuristic, and I'm a fan of the way it looks. As a driving experience, it was a completely new thing for people to really enjoy in that era of automotive engineering.
In a way, the Peugeot 205 GTI is like a Renault 5 GT Turbo, but with manners. And it's also like a slimmed-down version of the Golf GTI, like it's been on a diet or something, because it's just so nimble and light and agile.
Instead of going for speed and power, like the Renault 5 GT, Peugeot made precision handling the thing that set the 205 apart from other hot hatches. Ultra responsive, it put the driver in full control.
With hot hatches, balance and handling is absolutely critical. And Peugeot, they got it just right.
The 205 GTI didn't have a turbo, but what it did have in its favour was that it was really low weight. What that resulted in was just really sharp handling. It just felt really alive in your hands, and it was one of the most fun experiences you can have in pretty much any hot hatch.
They even manufactured the gear ratios so the Peugeot 205 could get to 60 quicker than the Golf GTI, because you didn't have to change into third gear. It would reach it in second gear, and that meant it grabbed the headline figures.
I think if you love driving and you love cars, it is impossible not to love the Peugeot 205 GTI. It's everything in one car: styling, performance, and the sweetest handling in one stunning little motor car.
We must have a winner.
I've driven one, and for me, it was just a little bit like a tank, and it was a bit tinny.
Oh dear.
Stylistically, it just isn't a head-turner, so I don't find it that interesting. Something's got to catch my eye first, then it's got to be really great performance-wise, and it was none of those things for me, I'm afraid.
You know when you go to a wedding and there's always that guest that shouldn't have been invited? Like that strange uncle that you like, I'm pretty sure I didn't send an invitation to that uncle, but they're there, like, tucking through the buffet. That's the Peugeot. It's the uninvited uncle to the wedding.
Ant would say that. See, he doesn't understand cars. He knows how to fix them, but he certainly doesn't know what makes them.
Being both pretty and quick, Peugeot knew the 205 would catch the eye of different drivers for different reasons. So a super-fast 1.9 litre was released to keep the boy racers happy, alongside a slightly more restrained 1.6 to keep their parents happy.
Well, the 1.6 was fast, but the 1.9 was crazy. And it was all put together in this tiny little package, so the power-to-weight ratio was enormous.
The 1.9 is way better. That's mine behind me. People say, oh, the 1.6, oh, it's sublime, it's lighter, it's this, it's quicker. It's like rubbish. The 1.9 is way better. I've had both. I own one of the best, and it's way better. Of course it is. Bigger is better.
Well, having the two different engine specs was a bit of a masterstroke, really, because the 1.9 was this amazing, class-leading engine that everybody wanted. But if you were a youngster and you couldn't quite afford one of those, or probably more to the point, you couldn't afford the insurance, you could go for a 1.6.
You had two engine options, either a 1.9 or a 1.6 GTI. Obviously, if you knew your onions, you went for the 1.9, but some can't quite afford it. So they go for the 1.6 option, and many a time have I seen the badge turned upside down, sort of pretending to be a 9 somewhere in there.
Because it's the car we all wanted 30 years ago, when you see the 205 going through auctions now, they can fetch 25, 30, 35 grand. It just goes to show how desirable that car is even today. It's more than it was when it was new.
The hot hatch was a connection between motorsports and road cars. Peugeot knew that their 205 could excel on the rally circuit, and they proved it. The 205 had 13 outright wins in the World Rally Championships in the 80s, which helped it sell 333,000 GTIs and bag Car of the Decade in Car magazine. Yes, the best of the 80s. That must have hit other manufacturers right where it hurts. This was the golden era of the hot hatch after all. Little surprise then that it is now a very valuable lump of metal.
There is a danger here that our hot hatch shortlist is skewing very European. Time to change it up a bit.
So while the Europeans were battling it out amongst themselves to see who could make the hottest of hot hatches, over in Japan they were preparing a tsunami of power.
Out of the box, this car is incredible.
This car, face like a bag of spanners, but that engine...
This thing is an absolute weapon.
It's the Honda Civic Type R.
This car was really understated. You know, it drove past you didn't really know what it was capable of. Revs, revs, revs! But it was a potent machine. The steering is so quick and the throttle response is like lightning. So it is an incredibly exciting car to drive. That, plus you've got Honda's excellent reliability and build quality. So all in all, this Civic is a fantastic car.
It's loaded with Japanese tech. It's got, lots of cool little quirky things. I remember when they first came out, the way it was, really stiff and it hopped around. It gave young drivers this feeling of excitement.
The Japanese build engines like the Swiss build watches. And when this car came over, it was a shock. It was tighter, more power, 2,000 higher RPM redline than anything we'd seen before.
Honda have been paying close attention to the European hot hatch market, quietly learning and improving and holding back their take on what a hot hatch should be. Britain in the 90s, we were used to Japanese cars from the likes of Toyota and Nissan to be a little bit, well, boring. So when a few car importers bought a handful of performance Civics over and showed them off at events, the cat was finally let out of the bag.
To see a grey imported Honda Civic Type R on the roads in England just made people's eyes pop out their heads.
Suddenly, there was a Japanese hot hatch. It had massive attitude and phenomenal power. It was a game changer.
You can't underestimate the effect that this car had on the tuning scene, particularly here in Europe, because it's a really strong, really tough engine, and it responds very well to just a few tweaks. So many kids, so many tuners, so many race teams kind of owe their existence to this car, and particularly this engine.
What a machine, a high-revving, reliable bit of kit. This is the absolute sensible hot hatch. But if you knew what you were doing, you could have a lot of fun in it. Mum and Dad would never know.
But it's not just what's under the bonnet that got our panel talking.
Absolutely dreadful. This thing fell out of the ugly tree, hit every branch on the way down, and then was run over by something. The best thing about the car is that if you sat in it, at least you don't have to look at it. But the inside of this thing was equally awful. It was like being sort of forced into a wheelie bin.
You got to be honest, this thing is fugly. But get inside it and it drives like a little race car. And that's exactly what boy racers are looking for.
The hot hatch genre brought some wonderful inventions like the GTI and the turbo. But Honda, they gave us another one, and that's the amazing VTEC engine.
Driving a Civic Type R at Flat Chat really is an assault on the senses. You get this wonderful thing as you go through the rev range and you get into what's called the VTEC zone where the valves open up and you're thrown back in your seat with this fabulous acceleration and the best induction noise, I think, of any car from the last 20 years. It really is the best noise ever.
This is what VTEC will do for you. This car was quite heavy, weighing around 1,200 kilograms, but it had 197 brake horsepower, launching you from 0 to 60 miles an hour in 6.6 seconds.
It sounded like a race car, it handled like a race car, and, you know, we did some silly things in that car. I mean, and when I say silly, I mean, it's absolutely awesome.
Once again, the developments in this hot hatch came out of racing. The engine came directly from Honda's F1 experience, and they wanted the cabin to feel like a race car cockpit, even moving the gear stick.
I think the unique position of having the gear lever up on the stick as well, from an ergonomic standpoint, it made it was close to the steering wheel, so you spend less time with your hand off the wheel, which I thought was quite a clever solution.
The gear stick is up here on the dashboard, so it's like you're sort of stirring the most manic of whisks.
A Civic Type R turns you into somebody that a lot of people are looking at, pointing and laughing at you and going, look at the man, why has he bought that childish little car?
Options are split here, so I think we should save the last word for somebody who's a genuine Formula One racing driver.
The Civic Type R certainly ticks the hot hatch boxes. You know, when you're driving down the motorway, it's loud, it's hopping around, and you thought, this is not very comfy. But then you get off the motorway onto the B road, and you go, okay, I get it now. It's nimble and agile and responsive. At the end of that B road, you get on a racetrack, and you drive a few laps. It does come into its own. It was just a really fun thing to drive.
For the world's greatest hot hatch is almost over, and it's taken us across the globe. But there's one final car that's made our hot hatch Hall of Fame.
Boom. That is the boy racer's car of choice.
I love this car because it pops and it bangs and it crackles.
This is a difficult one because, again, I love them. I mean, like, seriously, love them.
Yes, winning the final place on our shortlist is the most recent hot hatch in our lineup. It is the Ford Focus RS.
If the Honda brought a bit of civility to the hot hatch party, then the Ford Focus RS went and blew that straight out of the water.
A lot of my love for the Ford Focus RS definitely comes from the fact that my first car was a Ford Fiesta. And since then, I've always had a real love for them. And then it's just grown and grown and grown.
Ford Focus RS, this is the daddy of all hot hatches. And I don't care what anyone says. Back in the 80s and 90s, hot hatches were good. The Focus RS is great.
Keep your Ferraris, man. Keep your Porsches and your Paganis. I'm taking the Focus RS.
It will go down, I think, as the best hot hatch of all time. I promise you.
Back in the hot hatch heyday of the 1980s, Ford's first foray into this genre was with the XR range.
We think it's the best little car in the world. Could it be the second best thing in your life?
Countless Ford hot hatchbacks have come and gone since then, and they topped them all off as they screamed into the 21st century with the Focus. They equipped the RS range with gadgets and functions that celebrate everything it meant to be a truly modern hot hatch.
The thing with this car is you get a great engine that delivers huge power and huge torque. That's impressive in itself, but on top of all of that, you get all the tricks and toys that you might only normally associate with cars from way further up the scale.
The Ford Focus RS is a cool hot hatch. It's got all the tech and go faster bits that a boy racer would want, and it is just a nice car to drive.
Like many other hot hatches, Ford lent on their heritage and experience in motorsport to come up with the special features for the RS.
They've really looked at all of the various bits of engineering tech from their motorsport side and put it all onto this car for people to buy out of the dealership.
Whilst we've all grown up desperate to be racing drivers, we've aspired to be those guys, we've seen those guys using toys like this in their race cars. Well, now we can do it. Now we can pull up at the traffic lights, activate launch control.
And there's one new feature in particular which pushed the technology of the hot hatch into a new stratosphere. A drift button.
Not only should it have a drift button on it, it should have a handbrake turn button. It should have a button that blares Guns N' Roses out of the window as you're driving it. It's an ace car. It was daft, it was crackers. And you could just go down the road and get one on finance. Brilliant.
Just in that little button, Ford are saying, we understand our audience. We want to help you have fun, and this is the car you should be doing it in. They've nailed it.
Most hot hatches are front-wheel drive. Suddenly along comes the Focus RS, and you had all-wheel drive that could send most of the power to the back wheels. And that did one very big thing. It allowed you to have power oversteer.
Pointing forward is so last century.
It's a hot hatch, sure, but it also has the driving dynamics to match a rear-wheel drive sports car, which is, I can't believe I'm saying this about a hot hatch, but this is what Ford did.
Guaranteeing an awe-inspiring slide on the racetrack and an instant ban on the public highway. A drift button is an awesome bit of kit for the modern motorhead. But it's not all about the tech. Flick off the switches and it shows traditional hot hatch qualities too.
The toys are one thing, it's got all of those, but we need power, and it's got that too. It's got a 2.3-litre turbocharged engine delivering 345 brake horsepower, but perhaps even more impressive than that, 325 pound-feet of torque. I mean, that's enough to put a smile on anyone's face.